The Trap Set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click Donate. Subscribe to our show on iTunes, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a review.
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Colectivo Coffee, handmade coffee since 1993. Check them out online at colectivo.com. This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I'd like to play something for you. You're hearing Back Together Again by Fred Anderson and my guest, Hamid Drake, on drums. Over the past 4 decades, Hamid has established himself as one of the most exciting and well-respected artists in improvised music. His long list of collaborators includes such luminaries as Don Cherry, Ken Vandermark, Peter Brotzman, Bora Bergman, and Herbie Hancock. Both deeply spiritual and intellectually astute, Hamid has studied sacred music from around the world. His style builds on the American avant-garde artists that preceded him and incorporates the influences of, among other things, North African frame drumming, Indian tabla tradition, and the music of the Caribbean, especially reggae. Somehow, Hamid metabolizes this broad range of influences into a cohesive style all his own. And now, our interview with Hamid Drake.
At first, I started playing bongos in the church choir, and then from there, I became interested in the stage band. You know, the school that I was going to. Initially, I wanted to play trombone. And at that time, instruments were allotted to kids. So you could take home and practice and whatnot. But there weren't any left, so in order for me to be in a stage band, I had to play the snare drum and the big orchestral bass drum with another guy, which is something I definitely did not want to do. But as, a little time went on, I developed kind of like a love relationship with the drums.
Can you remember a moment when you realized that, like when you had an ecstatic experience as a young kid?
Yeah, when I saw my first drum instructor play drum set. His name was Harry Hawthorne. He was a big band drummer. And he was a drum instructor at the school that I was going to. Harry Hawthorne with Benny Bailey's and some of their other comrades, they came to our school and they did a concert, and when I saw my instructor, Harry Hawthorne, playing drums, that, something happened, something clicked, and it's been pretty much, the rest is kind of like history, for me, as far as drum set goes with the multiple studies and stuff like that. But I would say it's when I saw him play drum set.
Did you feel like you had like an out-of-body experience or just goosebumps up your spine, or what was it?
I had a real in-body experience.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Because if you have the outer-body experience, you're not going to feel goosebumps and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because you're not aware of your body per se. But it was a very tactile, very in-body experience, like, my heart beating and like getting really excited, And then something happened also where, in my own way, my own sort of thinking as a kid at that time, I saw that this instrument, the drum set, was actually a multiple instrument.
Yeah.
It was something that, it was many instruments combined into one, to make this contraption, as it used to be called.
So then how did your approach change after you had that revelation? Did you get more serious about it, study more?
Oh, yeah, I became very serious, and
How
also,
old were you?
At that time, I started when I was 9. So at that time, I was about 10, when this happened.
Do you have kids?
Yeah, I do.
How old are they?
My oldest daughter, Ananda, she is now 36.
Oh, okay.
And Shanti is 35. They're like a year and a half apart.
So you're 10, 11, and you're getting really serious about studying percussion and drums, and you're exposed to all this great music on the radio. When did you make the decision that you wanted to try to do music as your life's work?
Music as my life's work. See, that's an interesting question because I never thought about music as being different from my life. Now, we can look at the word work from many different perspectives, I mean, music, when I started playing music, it was my work. My work was to learn how to play.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was like to learn how to play with other musicians. Now, if you're talking about making a living playing music, that's a different thing.
Okay.
If you're talking about like working with music, making a living, that's a different sort of category. Because I know quite a few artists where art is like their life's work, but they're not trying to support themselves with
of course. But you at some point decided to support yourself playing music too.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
What was that process like?
When it first occurred to me, I think to like really try and make a living solely playing music. I was working at the Baha'i Temple in Wilmette. I started working there when I was 17. I was involved in a work-study program in high school. I'd get out of school at 12, and and go work. And so even at that time, I was doing like little gigs, around here and there, and I worked there for quite some time. And even after my first daughter was born, I was still working there. It was a fantastic job, and working in this amazing environment.
Well, what were you doing at the Baha'i Temple?
I did several things. When I first started working there, I was working in the gardens, and in the mailroom. And then later it switched to the gardens, and then I started working as a security guard. So my first trip to Europe occurred in 1978 with a saxophone player by the name of Fred Anderson, trombonist George Lewis. Was with the trumpet player William or Billy Brimfield and bass player Brian Smith, and I was still working at the Baha'i Temple at the time, and then another tour came up, with Fred, to go to Europe, and at that time, the boss that I had at the my supervisor at the Baha'i Temple, he would let me do these short trips, and also at that time, the group Mandingo Griot Society was starting to get some offers to do tours, okay? And so they were still letting me do these like little short runs, but it had reached a point where I couldn't do both, So I had to make a decision. What was I going to do? And an interesting thing happened also. The group Mandingo Griot Society, we had been playing around in the Chicago area for a long time. And by that time, my two daughters had been born. They were very young. Ananda wasn't quite 2. Shanti was maybe 5 months.
So you were in your early 20s when you first became a father?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Was that a plan?
No, is it ever?
I don't know.
People talk about Planned Parenthood, but I haven't met any parents where it was like, totally planned out.
Right.
I'm quite sure there are some, but, not in my sphere at the time. And so this company, this record label by the name of Flying Fish, approached us. And the owner of the label at the time, his name was Bruce Kaplan. and he approached us and he said he would like us to do a recording on his label. And we knew about Flying Fish. It was a pretty good label at the time, mostly centering around like folk or ethnic music. I think one of the biggest acts at the time was Sweet Honey in the Rock, and a very famous folk singer at the time. His name was Brian Bowers, and who's living in Seattle. And so we said, okay, we'll do it as long as we can have a special guest on the record, and that special guest has to be someone that, that of our choosing. And they said, okay. And so they said, who would you like? We said, Don Cherry. Mm-hmm. And we said, he's living in Sweden now. So you have to fly him from Sweden, put him up in the hotel, and of course, pay for his flight and pay his fee.
Right.
And Bruce was like, okay, no problem.
So this is when indie record labels could still do stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They could still do it, And so Don came, and we hit it off right away. And then Don, he said to me, hey, Hamid, why don't you and your family come and spend some time with my family in Sweden, 6 months or so. I was like, whoa, And I mean, that was such a big honor, someone coming from someone like him. So we did it. And also Adam Rudolph went with us, and we were there for quite some time. And so that was when I actually first left the day gig,
mm-hmm.
that I had. And after that, there was no turning back, And so, Don, this place that he had in southern Sweden, it was like a very large old schoolhouse, and his daughter, Nana Cherry, mm-hmm. she was about 15 at the time, and she would kind of babysit and watch Anand and Shanti when we were practicing. And so after we had our stint there, we did a small tour in France with Charlie Hayden.
Yeah.
And so... So after that, after that kind of experience, there was like really no turning back for me. I said, now it's either I have to do this and try and make my living doing this, and then if I can't, I'll humbly, back away and say, okay, I can't do it. Got to do something else. But that day never arrived where I said I couldn't. So.
When you're playing, how often do you feel moved to the core? Every time?
Good question. I feel I'm always moved by something when I play. It can be something that's happening around me musically with the other musicians. It can be maybe some little doodad that I might do. That's like, oh wow, I never did that before. Or it can be meeting someone from the so-called audience. The reason I say so-called audience is because I feel that we're all sharing this energy together. It's very circular,
Right.
And not only from time to time do the musicians have an effect upon those that are listening, but also those that are listening have a great effect upon the people playing the music too.
Of course.
And so, so it can be with someone from the audience coming up to me and saying something about what they felt or noticed or thought about what was happening with the music. And it can be something that I agree or disagree with, like it can be just as moving if they say they dug the music or that they were disturbed by the music. Oftentimes when someone is disturbed by what you do, that might have even more of an effect upon you.
Sure.
Than what them saying, oh man, that was fantastic. That was the most amazing thing that I ever heard,
Well, what mindset are you in when you're playing? Are you judging? Are you do you think it's meditative when you're playing? Is it similar to just straight up meditation?
Well, over the years, my concepts of meditation have changed, and different traditions have different concepts of meditation. Some say the beginning of meditation is the control of thoughts. I don't particularly believe that anymore, because I found that with myself, the more I try and control my thoughts, the more they assault me, assail me. They're upon me. They say,
like
this
quicksand.
is where we want to be.
Yeah.
But just relaxing, relaxing into that. Even if you have like a million thoughts, a million criticisms about yourself, just relaxing into that moment and having the freeness of mind to allow yourself to relax and just look at all that stuff, and just let it kind of pass by. But when I first started like playing more, doing more and more gigs, I noticed that I would always get really nervous, and phew, man, I used to think there was like something wrong with me, and that I was the only one that was feeling this because the other musicians weren't talking about it or anything like that, and almost to the point where I would get so nervous, almost to the point where I didn't want to play,
Yeah.
And then I was given just by chance, I was given a book by this author, psychologist, Rollo May. It was called The Courage to Create. And in his work, he speaks about the actual process that your body also goes through when you're about to do or you're about to engage in some type of creative endeavor. And he spoke about all of these symptoms that I was having, the nervousness of stomach, the butterflies in the stomach, oftentimes the heaviness of the legs, And he talked about how everyone that's involved in some type of creative endeavor, whatever it might be, oftentimes will experience that, speakers or musicians or school teachers, sometimes when we're about to engage in conversations, with others. I mean, it can happen. And so that helped me to relax with that particular thing and know that, okay, there's not something wrong with me. It's just my biological system, adapting to or trying to find a way to adapt or letting me know that something important that I feel is creative is about to happen. So even to this day, I still get those sensations, but my understanding and interpretation of them is different now. So now I worry if I don't get that feeling.
Yeah.
Then I feel like, okay, maybe now I'm too arrogant or too self-confident, or like I'm not, open enough, to the moment, because I don't want to go into any situation with myself thinking that, okay, I got this, I'm the baddest cat around, all that kind of stuff, because then it's a block. You're not allowing yourself to be open to something different that might happen.
Let's talk about your journey from the time when you came back from your tours with Charlie Hayden and Don Cherry back to Chicago, and you'd made the decision, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to make a living doing this. You had some mentors, right?
Oh yeah, quite a few. Yeah,
who were the most important at that stage?
I would have to say, well, of course, Don Cherry. He was one of them for sure. Musical mentors. I mean, Fred Anderson. Also at that time, I was meeting various exponents of different, holders of different sacred religious traditions that became mentors for me.
Which traditions?
Primarily at that time, it was Sufism and Vajrayana Buddhism, or what people call Tibetan Buddhism. Also at that time, I had met a visual artist who moved from Los Angeles and was living in Chicago, Eric Evans. He became a great mentor in a way, too, because we could talk about together. We live very close to each other, so we spend a lot of time talking about all these different concepts, how they relate to visual arts and how they relate to the sound arts. In fact, I say to this day, one of my greatest musical instructors was him, Eric Evans, a visual artist. Because one day he broke down like the principles that govern visual arts. He broke those down for me in a musical way, you know.
Like how?
Well, like how he talked about like negative and positive spaces, when there's like in visual arts, you can see right before you the negative and positive spaces, the spaces that are filled and the spaces that are empty. In sound, he spoke about that from the standpoint of when there is, a sound and when there's no sound. Just like when we play, sometimes we'll play a series of notes and then there'll be a rest. It's like no sound. Then we're back to the sound. And then later I learned that, in Buddhism, they talk about emptiness and form,
Right.
And then he talked about hue, all these color variations. And we have that also with the textures of sound, either with the production of notes from a melodic standpoint or from a rhythmic standpoint, And so that got me into thinking about extended techniques on the drum set, getting all these different shadings of color, with sound. And so he went on and on and on and speaking about these different things, and it really kind of blew my mind in the moment because I'd never thought about music so much from that perspective, And also Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, he was a Tibetan Lama teacher that was sent to the United States by His Holiness the Karmapa, who's the Karmapa at that time, and he had there was a Tibetan retreat center above Woodstock, New York. One day he really blew my mind. He came to Chicago and he was giving teachings, and at the time I was making my living playing in the reggae clubs in Chicago. And so I had an audience with him, and I said, "Oh, Rinpoche, I'm playing, in all these different clubs, and the environment is so, I use the word samsaric, And he listened, I went on about all these different things. And then finally he said, well, tell me what environment is not samsaric, depending on your perception, And I was like, he kind of stopped me in my tracks. And then he said, okay, next time, you go to work, with your music and you do a concert, he said, imagine that the concert space is a Buddha field. The concert space itself, the club, is a Buddha field. It's not distinct from that. He said, the people in the audience are Buddhas. He said, you are a Buddha, and the musicians that you're playing with are Buddhas. And he said, and when you play, imagine yourself sending like this beautiful light out from your heart to them. And they're sending it back to you, And then he said, when you play, recite the mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, And then he said...
What does that mean?
It means hail to the jewel in the lotus.
Uh-huh.
The lotus being our being itself, and the jewel, really being our own timeless awareness, our own primordial awareness, And he said, when you do that, then let me know where the samsara is.
Right.
Because he was just showing me, he said, look, it's like, it all depends upon, how you perceive appearances, really, what your perspective is, If you want it to be that, yeah, it'll be that, And you can go ahead thinking that, I got to go to this place. And and then you can like really hate what you do. Or you can look at it from another perspective.
Was it difficult to be on the road so much when your daughters were growing up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Of course.
Did you ever bring them with you?
Well, when we went to Sweden, we all went together, but oftentimes too, I was playing a lot in Chicago, and they would come to the concerts. Especially when they got older, they were coming to the concerts a lot. And their friends. So I just think parenting is probably one of the most difficult things. And then, it also there's times when you might feel as though you don't feel appreciated, by your kids.
Because you probably aren't always.
This is true. You're not always, and they also feel that you don't appreciate them. And then there's other times where it's like, it's a different, story. You might see eye to eye, or you might agree to disagree, or hopefully you move into a place of acceptance, because you can't control anybody's life.
Of course. And
especially when they get to, let's say your kids, get to a certain age, you can't control, their life or what they're going to do. They're in this life now, and so I think everybody has to make their own, what we might call mistakes too. And oftentimes, real maturity doesn't come about until we make certain, mistakes. Something that we can, compare the things to.
Do you think that your art better prepared you to get to that place of acceptance?
I think it can. That possibility can be there for sure. I think it depends on how we view, our art, and it depends on what art really means to the person.
Right. Well, some people are very controlling about their art, and other people just create an environment where it can happen. It seems like the latter might be more willing to accept things beyond.
Well, if you're a controlling person, it seems like if that's your personality type, then it doesn't matter so much what you do.
Right.
That's what you're going to bring to it.
Right.
And if you have a little bit more leniency and more openness about yourself, then you'll bring that to your other endeavors too. So. And I think there's just different people that have different personality types, and here we are, these human beings. We have to have some type of compassion and tolerance for one another, because the world is made up of all these different personality types, and this personality over here might be in conflict with this personality over here. So how do we find a way where these two distinct personality types can do something other than, just banging each other in the head all the time? And, okay, that's our world is that today. We have numerous wars going on, we have all kind of stuff happening within our government right now, everything from humongous egoity to to there being some people that do have like they have a big view, big mind, so but okay, how do we resolve those conflicts? We keep butting each other in the head. That obviously that hasn't resolved anything in the world. The only thing happens there is that the force is more dominant, and maybe physically stronger or has more resources, at their means to like just dominate, the other, and that doesn't bring any bounty really to anyone other than a temporary bounty to the dominant force, but it's temporary because they can be dominated too,
Sure. So how do you fit in? I mean, what are your goals moving forward? Do you have a vision for what you want to achieve, or how do
I fit into what I just said?
Yeah, and musically too.
Well, I'm a bridge.
Yeah.
One of my teachers, his name was Lex Hickson. He that's what he said about me. And when I began to reflect upon that, I said, yeah, that's true. He said, one day he said to me, he said, Hamid, you're a bridge. You know, you have to be a bridge, not only with like, you know, all the sacred traditions that I was studying, but also musically and just in life, period. And musically, I find myself being a bridge. I've had the good fortune to have been around many people that are coming from multiple musical traditions, you know, and sources. And fortunately, I had enough openness at the time to like learn from them. I think I grew up in a very non-provincial sort of way. And because of that, it has allowed me to be a bridge with musical traditions, East and West, North and South, and the various sacred traditions from the world, because I've been a student of them for like a long time, not only just reading books, but also spending time with people who are we could say, the great exponents, realizers, practitioners of those traditions, you know. And so, I'll say my function is pretty much that of a bridge, you know. And being the bridge, sometimes you're able to have a little bit of a sense of detachment also, you know, and see things from different perspectives.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. Hamid Drake, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Joe.
All right.
Thank you.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set. And visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Contact us at thetrapset@gmail.com. Next week on The Trap Set, I'll talk to founding member of Slayer and current drummer of Film, Dave Lombardo.